Island of Lost Souls. One of the most widely banned films of the 1930s was a horror sci-fi hybrid that horrified censors across the globe. Island of Lost Souls was released in December of 1932, directed by Earl C. Kinton, and based on H.G. Wells' 1896 novel The Island of Dr. Moreau. The film stars Charles Laughton as the titular Dr. Moreau, a scientist conducting grotesque experiments on a remote island, transforming animals into human-like beings through vivisection. The movie was banned in multiple countries, including the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, India, New Zealand, Singapore, South Africa, Hungary, Latvia, and Australia. In the UK alone, the ban lasted from 1932 to 1958, with the British Board of Film Censors refusing certification 3 separate times in 1933, 1951, and 1957. Censors cited the film as being against the laws of nature, objecting to its depictions of vivisection, which is surgery performed without anesthetic, and themes of playing God through the creation of human-animal hybrids. The film also featured implied bestiality, as Dr. Moreau attempts to mate his creation Loda, the Panther Woman, with the shipwrecked Edward Parker. Bela Lugosi appeared as the sayer of the law, delivering the famous chant, "Are we not men?" which later inspired the band Devo's name. This pre-code horror film helped hasten the creation of Hollywood's self-censorship board under Joseph Ignatius Breen, which was strictly enforced by 1934. The widespread banning across multiple continents for nearly 3 decades demonstrates how science fiction's exploration of playing God and tampering with evolution challenged both religious and social boundaries well before modern bioethics debates emerged. A Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick's dystopian masterpiece became one of the most controversial films in cinema history, banned across multiple nations and eventually withdrawn by its own creator. A Clockwork Orange was released in 1971, based on Anthony Burgess's 1962 novel, and stars Malcolm McDowell as Alex DeLarge, a charismatic delinquent leading a gang of droogs through a near-future Britain. The film follows Alex's violent crimes, his arrest, his subjection to experimental aversion therapy called the Ludovico technique, and his eventual release back into society. Initially, the film was banned in Argentina, Brazil, Ireland, Malta, Singapore, South Africa, and Spain for its extreme depictions of violence. In England, however, the film was approved by censors and became a massive box office hit in 1972. The situation changed dramatically when the film was linked to several copycat crimes, with courts insisting the movie had inspired real-life violence. Kubrick received countless death threats and endless harassment following these incidents. In response, Kubrick personally requested that Warner Brothers pull the film from UK distribution and disallow any future screenings in the country. This self-imposed ban lasted from 1974 until 2000, 1 year after Kubrick's death, creating a nearly 30-year prohibition. Many countries that initially banned the film eventually lifted restrictions, though with heavy censorship and strict adult ratings. This represents a unique case where the director himself became the censor after societal reaction to his film's content. It raises complex questions about artistic responsibility versus censorship, and whether art can inspire violence or merely reflects society's existing darkness. The film's exploration of state control and forced behavioral modification remains eerily relevant to modern debates about surveillance, criminal justice, and personal autonomy. Back to the Future. One of cinema's most beloved time travel comedies faced an unlikely prohibition in the world's most populous nation. Back to the Future, directed by Robert Zemeckis and released in 1985 starring Michael J. Fox, was banned in China starting in 2011 when the country declared a blanket ban on all time travel content in movies and television. This ban applied not just to this specific film, but to the entire time travel genre. The Chinese government censorship bureau, known as the State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television, stated that time travel disrespects history, and that producers and writers are treating serious history in a frivolous way, which should by no means be encouraged anymore. The concern centered on how time travel fiction allows examination of history in relation to the modern day, with some stories even changing history entirely, which Chinese authorities viewed as problematic. The ban extended to television shows and any media depicting time travel as a central plot device. This represents one of cinema's most unusual genre-wide bans, as rather than banning specific content, China prohibited an entire narrative device. The fear appeared rooted in concerns about allowing alternate histories or frivolous treatment of China's past, possibly worried about undermining official historical narratives. It demonstrates how even fantasy premises can be viewed as potential threats by authoritarian governments when they allow questioning of established historical records. The Matrix Reloaded. While The Matrix was a global phenomenon in 1999, its 2003 sequel faced complete prohibition prohibition in one Middle Eastern nation for philosophical and religious reasons. The Matrix Reloaded, directed by the Wachowskis, was banned in Egypt by the Department of Monitoring Artistic Products. Some Islamic publications had interpreted the first Matrix film as supporting Zionism, leading to immediate suspicion of the sequel. Egypt attributed the ban partially to scenes of excessive violence, but the larger concern was that the film deals explicitly with issues of creation and existence. Egyptian censors noted the film handles the creator and the created, the origins of creation, free will, and predestination, and stated these philosophical themes could cause crises and harm social peace. The committee expressed concern that addressing issues related to the three divine religions could spark social conflicts. The film's depiction of Zion, both as a city and as a concept, gave ammunition to critics who believed the movie pushed Jewish and Zionist beliefs. This demonstrates how science fiction philosophy intersects with religious orthodoxy in ways that challenge governmental control. The Matrix series' exploration of simulated reality, choice, destiny, and the nature of the creator posed challenges to religious authorities who controlled the interpretation of existence and free will. Egypt's concern that mere entertainment could harm social peace reveals deep anxiety about secular philosophical narratives competing with religious doctrine. The Hunger Games, the dystopian franchise that launched a young adult phenomenon, faced bans in two very different nations for remarkably different reasons. The Hunger Games, directed by Gary Ross and released in 2012, based on Suzanne Collins' 2008 novel, was banned in Vietnam by the Vietnam National Film Review Board. Vietnamese censors believed the depiction of violence was too extreme, first refusing to screen the adaptation and later issuing a full ban on the movie. The film follows Katniss Everdeen competing in a televised fight to the death among children in a dystopian future. In Thailand, the film wasn't fully banned, but became a political statement when students adopted the three-finger salute from the film in real protests against military leaders. Thailand prohibited the franchise from release because it had become a symbol of anti-government resistance rather than innocent entertainment. This shows how dystopian fiction can transform from entertainment into a political symbol. Thailand's situation is particularly notable because the film didn't violate content standards, but became a tool for actual anti-authoritarian protest. It demonstrates government's fear when fictional resistance narratives begin inspiring real-world action, with the same film threatening different regimes for entirely different reasons. Metropolis. Fritz Lang's groundbreaking 1927 silent science fiction masterpiece faced severe censorship and outright bans, despite becoming one of the most influential films ever made. Metropolis depicts a futuristic dystopian city divided between wealthy industrialists living in luxury skyscrapers and oppressed workers toiling in underground factories. The film was banned in Nazi Germany shortly after Hitler came to power in 1933, despite Lang being offered a position as head of the German film industry. The Nazis objected to the film's themes of class struggle and worker rebellion, viewing it as communist propaganda that could inspire unrest. Joseph Goebbels particularly despised the film's sympathetic portrayal of workers rising against their oppressors. The ban remained in effect throughout the Nazi regime until 1945. Additionally, before its international release, the film faced heavy censorship in the United States when Paramount Pictures acquired distribution rights. American censors cut nearly 1/4 of the film's runtime, removing substantial portions they deemed too politically radical or difficult for audiences to understand. These cuts eliminated crucial plot elements and character development, leaving American audiences with a significantly different and less coherent version. The original complete version wasn't restored until 2008, when missing footage was discovered in Argentina. This demonstrates how science fiction's exploration of class warfare and technological dystopia threatened both fascist and capitalist systems, with each cutting the elements that challenge their respective ideologies. By the way, if you're enjoying what you're watching, I make content like this regularly. Subscribing would be awesome. Mad Max. George Miller's dystopian action classic became banned for one of film censorship's most tragic reasons. Mad Max, released in April of 1979 in Australia and directed by George Miller, starring Mel Gibson, was made on a $400,000 budget and grossed over $100 million worldwide, making it the most profitable film ever made until the Blair Witch Project. The film was banned in New Zealand on August 9, 1979 by the chief censor for violence and antisocial behavior. The specific scene that triggered the ban showed the character Goose being burned alive inside his vehicle by a biker gang. This scene unintentionally mirrored a real incident that occurred shortly before the film's release, when gang members attempted to set Senior Sergeant Charles O'Hara on fire in his car in New Zealand. While the officer was rescued and survived, the The similarity to the film scene led censors to ban the entire movie. The New Zealand ban was lifted in 1983 after the success of the sequel, The Road Warrior, but only with a restrictive R18 rating. George Miller even traveled to New Zealand to testify against the ban during the 1980 review process, but the board upheld its decision. The film was also banned in Sweden until 2005 for excessive violence, creating a 26-year prohibition. This demonstrates the most problematic censorship scenario, banning art due to coincidental similarity to a real crime, despite no causal connection, since the film couldn't possibly have inspired a crime that preceded its release. Avatar. James Cameron's science fiction blockbuster became the highest-grossing film of all time, but China saw it as a threat to social stability. Avatar, directed by James Cameron and released in December of 2009, grossed $2.9 billion worldwide. In China, the two-dimensional version was pulled from 1,628 screens effective January 23, 2010, only 2 weeks after its December 10th premiere. The state-run China Film Group issued orders to stop two-dimensional screenings, though the three-dimensional version continued on 900 screens until its planned February 28th end date. However, three-dimensional theaters were much rarer, making this effectively a blanket ban. The film had earned 300 million yuan, equivalent to $40 million, in its first 8 days in China. The official concerns centered on themes of forced eviction and relocation, which were seen as politically sensitive. Chinese viewers drew parallels between the Na'vi people's forced relocation in the film and the real government practice of evicting people from generational homes to build commercial high-rises. Writer Huang Hong stated in the China Daily that the film struck a chord with Chinese audiences and created nothing less than a social phenomenon. All the forced removal of old neighborhoods in China makes us the only earthlings today who can really feel the pain of the Na'vi. Blogger Han Han added that, for audiences in other countries, such brutal eviction is something outside their imagining. It could only take place on another planet or in China. On January 13, 2010, the Southern Metropolis Daily ran the headline, "In a real-life version of Avatar, 500 homeowners successfully resist demolition," with organizers dramatically claiming they had staged their own real-life version of the film. The government ordered major publications to downplay discussion about nail houses, which is internet slang for homeowners resisting demolition. This represents a perfect storm where fictional narrative met real social crisis, with the film becoming an unintentional catalyst for real activism and providing language and symbols for political organizing. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Steven Spielberg's beloved family classic about a boy befriending an alien was deemed too dangerous for Scandinavian children. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, directed by Steven Spielberg and released in 1982, grossed nearly $800 million worldwide. In the United States, the film was rated PG for language and thematic elements, meaning parents could take children of any age. In the United Kingdom, it received a U rating, deemed suitable for ages 4 and older. However, Sweden banned children under age 11 from seeing the film when it opened in December of 1982. Norway implemented an identical ban for children under 12. Finland restricted viewings to ages 8 and above, while Denmark set the limit at age 7. Swedish censorship director Gunnar Arbach stated the film may cause mental injuries to children aged over 7 but under 11 years, because of its threatening and frightening mood, and the long scene where E.T. dies. The primary reason cited was that the film portrays adults as enemies of children. The Council of Children's Films chairperson, Kirsten Elmhorn, found the film very strong and suggestive, despite acknowledging it was extremely professional and well made. Spielberg personally lobbied Sweden to lower the age limit to 7, but his request was denied. On opening night in Stockholm, children too young to attend picketed outside the theater with signs reading, "We want to see E.T." Film researcher Ola Sjögren predicted the ban would be futile, writing that large numbers of 9 and 10-year-olds will sneak past the movie attendance, with their parents as accomplices. Swedish newspapers reported many under 11 children saw the movie by pretending to be of age. By January of 1983, the film had made $2.1 million in Sweden alone. In a 2007 interview, Arbach softened her position, stating, "During the years I have become more and more convinced that film does not have a negative effect on the audience. This demonstrates how adult fear of childhood trauma led to censorship that ultimately backfired, with the very children the censors claimed to protect rejecting the prohibition with their parents' help." 1984. Michael Radford's chilling adaptation of George Orwell's dystopian masterpiece became one of the most ironic bans in cinema history when authoritarian governments prohibited a film about authoritarian control. control. 1984, released in 1984, starring John Hurt as Winston Smith, depicts a totalitarian future where the party controls every aspect of citizens' lives through constant surveillance, propaganda, and thought policing. The film was immediately banned in the Soviet Union and throughout Eastern Bloc communist countries for its unflattering portrayal of totalitarian socialism. Soviet censors recognized the parallels between Orwell's fictional Oceania and their own surveillance state, particularly the film's depiction of rewritten history, forced confessions, and the thought police. The ban extended to Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and other Warsaw Pact nations. Singapore also banned the film in 1984, with authorities stating it could create social unrest and undermine respect for government authority. The irony was not lost on critics who noted that banning a film about censorship and thought control proved Orwell's thesis about authoritarian paranoia. The film remained prohibited in the Soviet Union until Glasnost reforms began in the late 1980s. Even after the Soviet collapse, some former communist nations kept restrictions in place for years. This represents perhaps the most self-aware censorship in history, with governments essentially admitting the accuracy of Orwell's critique by treating the film as a threat to their power. District 9. Neil Blomkamp's critically acclaimed alien apartheid allegory was banned in the very nation whose negative portrayal triggered the prohibition. District 9, directed by Neil Blomkamp and released in 2009, is set in Johannesburg, South Africa, as a mockumentary about alien refugees segregated into camps. The film serves as a powerful examination of xenophobia and social segregation, with obvious parallels to apartheid. Nigeria banned the film in 2009, with Information Minister Dora Akunyili stating it portrayed Nigerians as cannibals, criminals, and prostitutes. The film features a Nigerian crime lord character and depicts various criminal enterprises involving Nigerian characters. Despite being considered one of the best dystopian science fiction films of the 21st century, Nigeria's concern about international image overrode the film's acclaimed anti-racist messaging. This shows how nations prioritize reputation management over artistic merit, with a film designed to critique South African apartheid being banned by a completely different African nation for perceived negative stereotyping. The irony highlights how even well-intentioned social commentary can face censorship when it touches on national sensitivities. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Appreciate you watching.